Hi, y'all. Thank you for tuning in. My name is Danny. I'm a third-year PhD candidate in the Quantitative Biosciences program at Georgia Tech. And I'm going to talk to you briefly today about African herbivore biodiversity change over time from a multidimensional perspective. So over the last several million years, many of the planet's megafauna or large animals went extinct. And the question is, what caused this? So one hypothesis looks at climate change, that as grasslands expanded on a global scale, that many of the megafauna that were not adapted to this rapidly changing climate went extinct. And another hypothesis instead focuses on our ancestors, on early humans that may have hunted many of these species to extinction. And so we actually hypothesized that perhaps both of these forces were operating in tandem. And in order to test that hypothesis, we basically decided to look at megafaunal biodiversity, specifically of megafauna in East Africa, where there is a heavy dose of diversity of megafauna. And we wanted to look at biodiversity from a multidimensional perspective. And so to do that, what we did is we looked at three different dimensions of biodiversity in these East African megafauna and how they changed over time. The first dimension is taxonomic, which looks at species richness at any given time. Phylogenetic diversity is another dimension, which looks at basically the variability of the evolutionary relationships between species at any given time. And finally, functional diversity looks at the variability in the different traits that species have. And so what you'll notice here, in particular, once I add breakpoints from a breakpoint analysis to these various trends, that over the last 7.5 million years, depending on the dimension of biodiversity that you look at, you might come to a different conclusion as to what caused megafaunal biodiversity loss. So for example, if you look at taxonomic diversity, you might conclude that it was hominins, the emergence of Homo erectus, that may have triggered this diversity loss. But then if you look at functional diversity, you might come to a different perspective, that it was in fact a climatic force, the expansion of grasslands that caused the downfall of these megafauna. And so in sum, combining these different dimensions together demonstrates that perhaps both of these forces, hominin and climate, played a role in the loss of megafaunal biodiversity. And so in conclusion, like we said, it's possible that both climate and hominin impacts were acting in tandem here. And also for any study of biodiversity, particularly in relationship to the climate system moving forward, it's important to consider biodiversity from multiple dimensions in order to capture it as well as possible and in order to move forward meaningfully. With that, I'd like to acknowledge everyone who has made this work possible, and that's all. Thank you very much.